we pulled in, and me and the Lord been having this conversation. He'd been saying, "You're going to tell her," and I'm like, "No, I don't want to tell her."
Today, we are joined by a beautiful couple from the Rockies in Colorado in the USA. So James and Shannon Bates, they have 10 children and 7 gorgeous grandchildren. It feels like family is everything to you guys, and that's really, really special. So in 2017, James and Shannon, together with Shannon's mum, Nancy Coen, they launched the Global Ascension Network, which has just exploded, and it's now called Global Sons. It's a beautiful international family that is found deep within the heart of the Father. So together, Shannon and James are now running this global ministry from their headquarters in Colorado, which I believe includes the Tree of Life Wellness Center. Shannon is also a profound speaker in her own right, whose message is truly impacting with her ability to share with such authenticity and love. It's very, very special. This is the first time that we have had the pleasure to meet James. So we are looking forward to getting to know your passions and your heart over the course of the next hour or so as we unpack a beautiful conversation with you guys. So welcome, Shannon and James, to the Reimagine podcast with Sean and Kylie. It is a delight to have you on the show.
Well, we're honored.
Yes, we are.
We're honored to be here. We've had quite the weekend already. We did a big webinar yesterday. James was hosting it with a friend of ours, Mark Wilborn, myself, and my mom, Nancy Coen. So, and then today we had an open house for the Tree of Life Wellness Center. So downstairs, and getting that kicked off for everybody's New Year's resolutions to focus on their health a little bit more. Then we have another conference coming up this week, and we stayed up and watched movie night last night with our kids. So last night we were up till 2 o'clock in the morning with all of our kids having a movie night.
We love talking about mystical discussions, like the discussions that you guys bring when you travel the world and you and your mum share on stage about the wondrous mysteries of God and the possibilities. We also love the fact that we can also talk about sitting at home with popcorn all over us watching movies, because we really like to bring to the people that follow us, the reality of what heaven on earth looks like, and being able to interact with supernatural beings. What does that actually look like when you're actually living a life like everybody else that's walking down the street is living as well?
That's loaded.
It's wonderful.
Really loaded question. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't got to the question yet. No, I guess I'm just sort of setting it up for you to understand what it is that we talk about. And what we like to relate to the people that listen to us is, you travel the world. Your mum has a book called Limitless. We're limitless beings. There's that expansive thinking. There's that talk. And that is our reality as well. And then there's also you're running around trying to download software to get an interview to work. How do those differences join together and merge to help us live a life of believing that all things are possible?
I think for us is we've really learned to be able to walk in the heavenly realms and function down here the way that we need to. And you can be in both places at once. You're not limited to one or the other. So as we're doing our daily things with our families and our kids, all of that gets brought into it in a fabulous way. In conversation, and what did you say? Where did you see that? And and so we're talking about it even when we drop our 12-year-old off at school. We're talking about all the stuff that's happening at school, and then we're talking about being in the heavens at the same time. And he's like, if I get really frustrated, I just close my eyes and take some deep breaths, and then I go, and then I come back and everything's good again. So he's got a lot of energy, and he's learned coping mechanisms for knowing that he doesn't have to be pressed down here. And he can go and be functioning there and come back with a totally different piece than he had 5 minutes before. Mm-hmm. And nobody even knows he's doing it, just because it's, just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and just go. And then all of a sudden you're back into the grind of, you know, doing math homework or, you know, playing on the football field or whatever. I think my mom has been a very good example for not just for our family and for the world, but for the world. Because she's been doing it for 40 years. And, you know, we stepped into this probably 22-ish, maybe
Yeah.
22 years ago. But she's been doing it much longer than that. And her progress was a whole lot faster than ours. Ours was, you know, filled with the everyday grind of having so many children and you know, rushing from one sports event to another. And
Because we were always so busy, we didn't take the time to really engage with that. But I will mention this. One of the things that we learned is children have imaginations. I mean, if we weren't where we were and walking where we've been walking for so long, we could have easily done this. But we hear parents saying to their children, "Oh, that's your imagination." They talk their children out of walking in what Yahweh's created and where He's designed us to walk. And so, by us learning years ago to be able to encourage our kids to be able to engage with that, it's allowed them through that access to be able to engage with the Lord, what He's trying to show and do. And we have some teenagers. I'm not going to say which ones, but there's been many times they walk in and say, you know, I can see what's happening over the next 2 or 3 hours or days, or and they've actually said, oh, well, you know, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, da 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 da. And the next thing I know, I just kind of stand back and watch, and it happens exactly as they said. And then, you know, we have some other ones that say, you know, I really feel that this is going to take place in the next month or the next 6 months. And they're seers, and they've never, you know, because Yahweh's given them downloads and been able to see.
well, and I think part of that in our own journey is realizing that that is our creative center point that Yahweh gave us. And a lot of us had to, especially as adults, had to relearn or remember that we had that in us to begin with. So seeing and hearing and all of those things were, you know, in the system of religion. The system of religion was shut down, not in the relationship of religion. There's very big difference between the system of religion and the relationship with Yahweh. And I think that when we disentangled from the system and the all the you can't because that's select for certain people, and those people are the ones that are going to get the words, and you have to go to this person, that person, or the other person. All of a sudden, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, he meant that for me. He meant that for my benefit, for my family's benefit, for our generations. You know, we've got grandbabies now, 7 of them. And we want to cultivate that in them and watch their parents cultivate that in them as well, because our oldest grandchild is 10. So we have 2 10-year-olds, and we have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, 2 3-year-olds, and a 1-year-old. There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. They're better than I do.
And we don't ever want them to get to a space where that's been shut down in them. So when they turn 20 years old, or when they're stepping into their adulthood, they don't have to remember what they already had access to in the beginning. And so it's really exciting. I think when we practice it, because it takes practice, it's not just, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to walk in the Spirit all day, and I'm not, all this stuff of the world's not going to bother me. We have teenagers, so that is not a real thing. You know, interesting life, but we are practicing. So the more you practice and access the mystical, the more you practice and access those heavenly things, the easier it becomes. So I can be in the middle of an ascension with a group of people online, and all of a sudden something comes across my desk that I can take care of and never disengage from what I'm doing, because he just gives us the ability to do that. But this takes practice.
It does.
Just like with meditation. You know, I heard somebody, she goes, oh, I'm going to meditate for an hour every single day. I said, have you ever done that before? No. I'm like, and you're going to start with an hour a day. And I know that's not really, it just doesn't happen that way. It starts with
Yeah.
5 minutes, and then it's 15 minutes, and then it's 30 minutes. And all of a sudden you're living in a meditative state all the time because you practice and practice and practice. It's kind of like somebody that goes, you make the New Year's resolution, I'm going to run a marathon by February, but you haven't walked 3 miles yet. And that's not a,
Yeah.
that's not really, you have to give yourself the grace that he gives us to be able to be on the journey where it is, where we're accessing so much because we've practiced, that the earthly things seem, oh, well, that's already done. Oh, I already got that done. But I was in the spirit all day, but all of the stuff just got taken care of. And I think that's the place that we all have to know and give ourselves grace in the journey of that, because it is practice. And it does take persistence, and it does take, that knock and keep on knocking thing in scripture is you got to keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing until all of a sudden there's no more push, because it's just your state of being.
It is.
So,
Yeah, it's so true. Like, it's so true. I think many of us want that miraculous moment where all of these things are bestowed upon us, like magically all of a sudden we become. But even though we are already all of these things, there is that journey of walking it out. And I feel like, where did that begin for you guys? Were you always on the same page with this new paradigm of understanding? Have you guys been in that place where has there been like a fleshing it out, or like a, or have you just been like, oh wow, like
right into it. Because we both grew up in the system of religion. I'm going to call it the system because I don't want to use words that are going to offend anybody, because there is a system of religion.
There is.
James was a professional heathen.
I was.
When he was,
Wow.
in his growing up years.
Yeah, before I came to Yeshua, I was a real good heathen. I did it well. And so through a
So what
series,
does that mean, James? When you say that, what does that mean?
I was a naughty boy. I won't go into a lot of details, but I was not a nice person, and I didn't like me, and that led to a lot of drug abuse and different things that I lived through. And I did that for 14 years, started at an early age, and the Lord delivered me from that 33 years ago. And so when he did that, I immediately turned to him and began to have one-on-one with him, and did end up into a religious system and did that for quite a few years. And then I stepped out of that knowing that there was more. And so we've gone through, and then we met after the Lord had set me free from all that, because that wasn't something that would have ever worked in this relationship. So he cleaned me up literally in a matter of 3 days time and set me free. And so a number of years later, I met her and we got married, and the rest is history. That was
7 years ago.
Yeah, 27 years ago. So
Wow.
27
so
years.
yeah, it's been a journey. Hasn't always been perfectly smooth, but it's been good.
It has, and we're grateful for each one of those stepping stones.
Yeah.
It's so funny when he tells me stories of who he was before. I looked at him and I said, I would have hated you. I would not even have spoken to you. And before,
me too, so.
I was like, you did what? I mean, it just blows my mind because I know who he is. He just finally remembered who he was. So we're very grateful because we did meet in that place. I grew up, my mom came to the Lord when I was about 8 years old. And she went full-fledged. I mean, we couldn't watch half the things on television because there was something going to infect us, or we couldn't listen to it. I mean, it was like, this is the way, but I think each one of us has to find our own path and our own journey. And I got filled with the Holy Spirit when I was in 7th grade at church camp. My mom wasn't even there. But then I became a teenager. And I did like a lot of the other teenagers, especially ones who had parents in full-time ministry. They had to do the rebellious thing so that all the people in the school didn't think they were goody two-shoe kind of people. So I got in a lot of trouble with like the pastor's kid, just trying to find my own journey, that it wasn't the same as my mom's. And so I went through a rebellious period. And when I was in my 20s, came back to the Lord with a mash. I was married before. And I got married very young. I got married 19 years old, and we had 2 kids right off the bat. I mean, I was serving in the church every time the doors were opened, because I just have this heart for family and children, and I wanted to be the correct example for them. Then, circumstances led to what they did. And my ex didn't always speak very kindly, and he was a wanderer. I quit college so he could finish, the typical story. And then him and his secretary had a fling kind of thing happening. And so we split up, and I went to the church because I was so wounded and broken, and I didn't understand. And I felt like God wasn't answering my prayers. And when I did, they were too busy with their ministries to have time for me. And I served every time the doors were open. And so I left the church. I was so angry. I was mad. God could have struck me down for some of the things I said, and he had right to do so, because I was mad. I was angry. And, because I felt like my prayers hadn't been answered and all that stuff. Little did I know that they were being answered in a way that I couldn't understand at the moment. We don't always get the answers that we want sometimes. But that may not be what we need. And he did say he would provide all of our needs, not all of our wants. And, my ex-husband's been married 4 times now. Matter of fact, my husband ministered to him at our daughter's wedding, and he just broke into tears and cried. Now he's been with the same person ever since, because it was something he'd never had an example of in his life. He didn't know what full love was all about. And I believe now that he's found that finally. But it was a big part of James loving on somebody he didn't really want to love a lot, because of how I was treated or how the kids were treated or whatever. And he out of his own heart ministered to him and said, this is what you want. I know this is what you want. And he's out there crying, and I'm going, what in the world? I was in shock.
Did James punch him?
Not at that moment. There were many times when he wanted to. And
yeah, the Lord did some really cool things, because I'd go out to address something and he just disappeared, and that was the best thing to happen. It really was, looking back.
But for us,
in that moment, there was some challenges.
There were lots of challenges.
So.
But out of his obedience, it shifted something inside of him to build, because it's important that the father and grandfather that we share grandkids with knows the Lord. It's important for him. So if there was any negativity or any kind of bad feelings towards him, that may not be possible. And now he's building a relationship in a way that's so deep with our oldest 2 kids, because James really raised the oldest 2. And, he was here and there when he didn't have things to do himself. And so as they've become adults, he's really tried to build it. But it all started with him just loving on him. When our daughter got married, she got married 7 years ago. So it's been about 7 years where we've seen the change and shift in him. So I think for me, stepping into this, I was always very, very happy being behind the scenes and not being out front and doing all the grunt work and being the mama at home that it was just my safe place. I was the one of the girls. I have 2 other sisters that was probably the least likely to be doing what I'm doing. The other ones are much more outgoing and outspoken, and just didn't have. I used to get in front of people and shake like crazy. Like in high school, and I have to read a paper, my whole face is like shaking because I didn't want to read in front of anybody.
I was there too.
And then about 6 years ago, James, I'd already worked on starting the network with Mom. She came to me and asked me if I would work. Can you help me start this part-time? And I said, sure, part-time. Part-time was about 40 hours a week. And currently working for a hospice company where the Lord was just taking me through a pattern of really understanding in a deeper way through my own lens and not my mom's lens about supernatural things and beings and creative miracles and just being the light in people's lives. And so I was working for hospice at the time, and I stepped into this. And about 6 years ago,
A little longer.
James, you can tell the story because this is how we stepped into what I'm doing now, traveling all over the world. Because I was happy behind the computer doing all the other stuff, the administrative stuff.
Yeah, I was doing construction at the time. I've been a residential construction guy for 40 years. I had been up to that point. And all of a sudden one day we were together, and the Lord told me, he said, you have to tell her. And so me and the Lord got in an argument about this because I didn't want to tell her because I knew what it meant. I'll tell you about what it meant and afterwards. And so me and the Lord are having this conversation over here. She had no idea, and I'm driving, and we were pulling into a business, and we pulled in, and me and the Lord been having this conversation. He'd been saying, you're going to tell her. And I'm like, no, I don't want to tell her. And I didn't want to release what he had been showing me for 3 years prior to this very moment. And we pull into this parking lot and we park, and I just break down. I just, because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to tell her. And she says, what is wrong with you? I get a little tenderhearted sometimes.
Just sometimes.
Yeah. And I said, there's something I got to tell you. And boy, she folds her arms. I didn't present it very well, coming out the gate there. And she folded her arms and she's like, oh, really? What? And so I said, well, I got to tell you something that the Lord's been showing me. And she's like, oh, what is it? And so the Lord had been showing me that they would start traveling and they would start speaking together, and that she's always prepare, regardless of what it is. And he showed me for 3 years that she would prepare her notes, prepare her messages, and then she would get up and start to preach, and she'd close her computer about halfway through. And then I kept seeing like this lightning bolt connected to her head from the heavenlies, and he was giving her the major download. And she would preach from the heart instead of from the notes that she had written, which were not a waste because she always used it at some point. And so I told her this, and she's like, what are you talking about? I don't speak in front of people. And I said, well, you're going to. And so it was not a month after that got first invitation to come speak. And so I was with them. And so as her husband and her covering, I released her to go do this. And some people don't really grasp the fullness of what that meant. And it's not a pat on the back for me. It's the grace that he gives me as I'm giving him glory, because it's not something I could do solely on my own. Is I knew she was going to be traveling a lot. And that was why I was so argumentative with the Lord about releasing that. And so, and he won. And so moving forward, so what that really looked like was, I know Mom, Nancy, my mother-in-law, I've watched her travel 300 days a year for multiple years at a time. But they didn't have any small children at home. Well, we do. We did. They're a little bit older now. Our youngest is 12. And so what that meant was for me is I'm mom and dad. So I get the kids up, take them to school, get them home, do homework, cook dinner, and do the daily routine, do the nightly routine to get the kids, to and from school, and do all the activities that we do, from basketball, hockey, baseball,
Horseback riding, volleyball.
Yeah, and gymnastics at one point for our daughter that's at home. And so it was a full schedule in itself. So I knew that by releasing that's what was going to happen, but I was in agreement with it, because I knew that what they needed to do needed to happen And in order for them to sacrifice, I needed to sacrifice because, to travel 200 days a year, sometimes that's tough on a family. But we know the Lord's got his hand on it, and he has really blessed us in all aspects of being able to fulfill that vision that he gave me, that
Mhm.
has been in the plans for a very long time. And I finally submitted to it. So it's coming to pass.
Well, and it's still kind of kick you out of the next moment, because I was still kicking. I was okay with what I was doing,
Yeah.
and didn't need to do that. Since just the end of this year, we've been to New Zealand, Korea, Thailand, and where else did I go? Somewhere else since August. So
Wow.
I'm trying to remember. There were several places. Yeah.
We're going to come to Australia again next year. Very excited about that. But I was okay. I'm okay with not being out there. But the Lord has asked if I was willing. And I was like, well, I'll do anything you ask me to do. And just make sure that you take care of, my things here. Luckily, I'm not traveling 200 days a year, because that would be way tough.
That only happened a couple years.
Yeah. But most of the time it's, 6 weeks and away from a big meeting. COVID was great, because then the kids went with us. So because they all, all the schools shut down, and that was awesome. So the kids were with us at all the meetings, and because, the United States can be a little bit rebellious on being told what to do. And so we were still going to do the things we wanted to do without having anybody interfere with us.
And we did.
And we did. We just packed them all in the camper and took them on the road. So they've been part of most of these meetings.
Wow.
The ones in the States, especially, I'm hoping that next year they'll be able to go to New Zealand. We've taken them to Israel with us when we go to Israel. So when the provision is there for us to bring them along, we do. And we've got some of them that are really wanting to go down the same road. Some not, and some are. We've got kids that are in full-time ministry, adult children that are in full-time ministry. One's on staff at Bethel in California, and one is he and his new wife are about to take over the youth pastorship at their church in Texas. And then we've got one, our almost 16-year-old, who is she's more dedicated sometimes, I think, than me, in her thinking systems with Yahweh and what she feels like is her path and her journey. I said the one thing I can tell people is, they're like, well, I know my son's supposed to do blah, 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 blah. I said, yeah, but it's his journey, and you have to let it be his journey, and you can't be your children's Holy Spirit. You can be their guiding direction, but when they hit a certain age, they really have got to figure out their own path and their journey. And I'm really grateful to my parents for doing that for me, because they loved me through my rebellion. They loved me through trying to figure it all out, and just walked beside me when I was confused and didn't understand. And I think each one of those were very detailed and intricate steps that we had to take for the understanding. It's just like when my mom was an atheist, she had to go down that road to be able to love the way that she loves people that are considered unlovables. And so I think that our gratefulness for that system of religion where we met each other, where we had children, where, and some of them are our dear, dear, dear friends. And
amazing people.
And it's an amazing place. We just weren't satisfied to be there anymore. Not because we were upset with anybody or anything. We just knew that the Lord had more. And that's really what took us down this mystical understanding or mystical realm to where we are today. Because if we would have stayed there, we wouldn't be here where we are now. And especially because we love people so deeply, and relationships are so important, and we just would have never left. But the Lord shifted us and moved us from Texas to Colorado. We thought we'd live in Texas our whole lives. And it was that transition period 12 years ago. I mean, we lost everything we owned in an hour in a house fire. And that brought us to Colorado, where the ministry has started, where we've seen this explosion in spiritual growth happen in our lives with our kids. And we would have just stayed in Texas. So everybody asks me, well, what happened to your house? I said, oh, God burned my house down because we would have never left. We would have never left. They're like, what? And I'm like, he needed me to move, and we just wouldn't have moved.
Yeah.
And
we came up here to get away for a week, and we ended up leaving owning a home. So we came up here to kind of decompress back in October of 2012, and we left owning a home. So we moved up here month and a half later.
Yep.
And been here ever since. And we miss our friends in Texas, but we don't miss how hot it is, and we don't miss the traffic in Dallas.
And then mom moved here 4 years after us.
Yeah.
So we moved in 2012 and she moved in 2016. And then of course the Lord totally divinely put together the Global Sons, which started off as Global Ascension Network. We made the transition to Global Sons because it was a time of maturing, I think, for people to step into their sonship and no longer be, waiting around with, oh, maybe, or oh, maybe not, kind of that immaturity thing. It's really the understanding, the recognition of us as sons of the living God, and taking our position as sons. And so we made that transition a few years ago. But that would have never happened if we were still in Texas, and it would have never. So I give, yes, my house burned down. Yes, we lost everything we owned, but we give the Lord glory for, he really directs the footsteps of the righteous. And we had come into a place where we were totally surrendered and trusted him in all things. And so it didn't even shake us, I don't think, when the house, and I was 9 months pregnant. So I was like 9 months pregnant. Here's my birthing center. We've just lost everything we own. Our house burned down in July. The baby was born in August. And, but there was just a peace. There was a total peace that the Lord gave us in the midst of that. And we just knew there was no questioning. It was just like this overwhelming washing of peace that he gave us in the midst of that, and bringing us to the mountains where we had no family, where we had, it's like, okay, why are we moving to the mountains? But we knew the second we drove on that property, this is our home. And there was just like this closeness, I think, there of, you could just feel the Lord's pleasure in our obedience to listen. And then 4 years later, my mom and dad got to move here with my sister and my nieces. My sister has twin girls, and they moved here in 2016. And my children, who'd never lived in the same area, because Texas is a big state, so we were 7 hours away from my mom, and it's kind of like you guys driving across Australia. You could be driving. Well, Texas is the same. And so they didn't get to see or spend time. So my younger children got to have a closeness with my parents that they never had before. So it was really good. And, now they're going over there when she needs help doing anything. She's like, can you come over and get these boxes down? Can you come do that? And they're so honored to be able to do that, and spend that time with her and travel with her and hear her stories too. And now they're hearing mine.
Time.
Yeah. Now they're hearing mine.
Yeah.
And so it's just about
it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Like, what a great, I find it interesting, how you have those times of great adversity and difficulty that seem to be all the way along our path.
Yep.
And, it's like when you talk about that feeling of animosity and difficulty that you had, James, like with Shannon's first husband. And then, these things like, why did my house burn down? And like all of these things that are on our pathway, those unanswered prayers, those things, well, why is this happening to me? And I feel like when we're on the pathway with God, we feel like, well, why aren't we being rewarded for our following him? Why aren't we being rewarded in these places? It's hard to reconcile with those moments of difficulty. I think we shared with you guys, like when we all stood together in that 24-hour prayer that we had for Chris Carter. And I know he was a very dear friend of you guys, and it was one of those times too where you can't see any good coming from that loss. But how do you guys find that place where you reconcile with those difficult moments? Because it is difficult for so many people who love God so much, yet they find themselves in these really difficult situations, and they're losing people that, especially now when we have this beautiful new paradigm of life and immortality, and we're embracing being able to see things beyond anything that we've ever imagined in the past is now something that actually is the reality of our future. How do we bring that back into this place where we reconcile with that loss and that grief and these difficult things that we're walking through?
Well, I think for me, Christopher and his wife Melissa and their kids are very good friends. I still consider Christopher a friend. He's with me all the time, and I can hear him every so often. He'll giggle. He has this very distinct laugh. And we were in Texas at Joy Fest this year, and we took our kids on a vacation before Joy Fest, and we went to this place called Illumination or something like that. It was this whole star thing that you walk through, and Christopher was my star guy. I always called him and said, "Hey, what about this star, and what about that star, and why are they doing this?" And and he would just giggle. And we were walking down, and one of my kids grabbed my hand and he goes, "Mom, Christopher would love this place." And all of a sudden I heard his voice and he goes, "But the real thing's so much better." And I was
Wow.
he had this chuckle. He had this kind of jolly little laugh, kind of quirky little nerd laugh that we would tease him. James and him would get in trouble a lot because they have this sense of humor. Sean would jump right in with them with the sense of humor that he carries. And I think part of it is really completely surrendering to trust. And, your show's Reimagine. So reimagine the understanding that we have of the depths of what the plan that the Lord has. I really believe that, because for us, it wasn't just losing Christopher. A week later, we lost another good friend who is the exact same age as Christopher. They were diagnosed at the same time. They were both fathers and husbands. So Nick Jones, who is a good friend of ours and part of our ministry as well. So Christopher transitioned at the beginning of June on the 16th, and Nick transitioned on the 25th. So it was a struggle for us. Because we, we're believing in total healing. And I really believe what we did in that 24-hour prayer time was to give him the breath he needed to share his heart with his children. And because Melissa kept texting me during that time. And so we didn't fail. And I think people need to understand that we didn't fail, that the Lord gave him the breath that he needed to communicate his desires for their future with him, that he would not have been able to have had we not engaged for his breath. The same thing with Nick, because James went up there as soon as, the diagnosis came. And I mean, they were literally at the exact time. They were both 44 years old, and they literally transitioned within a week. And I feel that when we step into complete trust, okay, Lord, you know what's going on. And I know, our hearts, and our woundedness in what has transpired. And this should not happen. But I really believe that with all of my heart, that there was a plan that we don't understand that we'll know. And Christopher, if you've watched his teachings, and he literally mapped out his place in heaven. He knew the dimensions, he knew the sizes, he knew the rooms, and that's not what normally people would do, but it was like he knew. And even though I know he was believing that he would be healed here on earth, which he is, because he's totally healed. He's just in a different dimension than we are right now. And I really believe that he is working together with the Lord to fulfill his plan that's taking place right now.
Both of them.
Yeah, both he and Nick are working. They actually got to talk with one another before they transitioned. And I think they shared some deep things that they didn't share with other people. And, Melissa and Christy, Nick's wife, are just precious. James and I support them every single month. We're in contact with their families on a regular basis. And I think that if we get caught up in our earthly understanding of things, it's very easy to get to a place where you're questioning who Yahweh is, where you're questioning the plan, where you're questioning all those things. But we have a hard time sometimes seeing the end. So we have to reimagine those things and okay, Lord, show me this. This isn't final. Christopher's journey is not final. He's still working with us on a daily basis. And I tell you, I can hear him and feel him. I'll be in a meeting and I know that he's there. And he's come and visited his kids. He has shown up and had conversation. I know he's shown up and have his, Nick has had conversations with his boys. And, Yeshua showed up to encourage them in their sacrifice, because it is a sacrifice for them. It's a sacrifice for the body. It's a sacrifice for all of us that really gained, his school is still going. He's, I'm on the Discover the Heavens thing, and every so often I'll go and I'll engage with one of the teachings that he has, because they're living and they're breathing, and he's living and breathing.
Yeah.
And we just have to not so focus ourselves on what we've lost, but what we've gained. And
and some of that is from a mystical point, from walking in an ascended state. I'm not saying it was easy to see both of them transition, but I will say that the comfort of the Lord was so great during that time, by me able to walk in that ascended state, communicating with Yahweh at the same time that all this was taking place. That brought an enormous amount of peace. And I don't understand it as to why these things happen, but there's a purpose. One day I will. And it's had its challenges for sure. I mean, it hasn't been the easiest thing, but the Lord's got something he's doing there. And I can't answer what that is, because he hasn't shown me that. That's not for me to know at this time. So, but they're doing something.
I think the main thing is just trust.
Mm-hmm.
Trust. And especially when we don't understand things, I could have felt the same way when my house burned down right in front of my face. And I just sat in the cross. They made me sit down because I was so pregnant, and they were like, you have to stay seated, or you're going to, because they were scared I was going to go into labor or something. I just sat there and said, Lord, I trust you. 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 And our family, our children did not even have shoes. We were down the street at a swimming pool party for an end of the bay. So we walked away from that house they had nothing. They had no shoes, no nothing. But the Lord overwhelmingly, I think because of our trust, really supplied all of our needs. Maybe not all of our wants. And I think that's where people sometimes get sidestepped a little bit, is they think they have this thing of needs and wants being the same, and they're not. And it's just completely trusting fully. And you may have to say it 1,000 times. You might have to go over again. And that's what I did. I was like, I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. And I'm just totally engaging with the trust. I trust you. I trust you. And then the answer came. And right over our house, in the middle of a storm that was trying to keep up, was this double rainbow as my house is burning down. I'm like, okay, we got this. We have this. It's not, it's not going to be the end of the world. And my mom, who calls, and I go, Mom, you better pray, my house is burning down. She goes, oh, honey, this is going to be the biggest blessing of your life. And, and truthfully, but had I looked away from the eyes of the Father, had I looked to the possibilities of what could happen, my steps would have been very different, because I would have been sidetracked. And I would have come back to the path eventually, with a little bit of rocky road, a bumpy, it's kind of walking out in the bush where you don't have shoes on, and you're, all of a sudden you step on something sharp, or you're doing this or you're doing that. This way, because my eyes literally stayed focused on him. And it had to that way when we lost Christopher and Nick too. And we did. And we were on our way down to my niece who got radically healed from a huge disease that was taking her life. We were on the way down to celebrate. We actually almost stopped and flew to Florida instead. And we heard Christopher said, "Don't do that. You can come next when the big celebration of life. Don't miss this." And so there was this. Christopher loves storms, and he loves storms. One of his beings that he engaged with quite often was his name was Marshall, and he was like over the storms, right? So while we're driving to Texas, and even my children at that time, let's see, Destin would have been 10. He would have been 10 years old, and he's friends with Christopher's youngest son or only son, Samuel. And we're driving, and they knew what just had happened. They knew what had just happened. And we're driving down there, and all of a sudden the storm is like off in the distance. And my 10-year-old son looks over at us and he goes, "Mommy, Christopher's showing off just a little, don't you think?" So because of our response and our complete trust in him, he realized, here he is. He fought, I mean, for hours. There was this storm that never came on top of us. It was just off to the side a little bit. And it was like lightning and thunders and all of this stuff. That was his response.
Yeah, it was over 100 miles
that followed
storm
us
was
for
hit.
about
Yeah.
100 miles down there, because it's
Yeah.
about an 18-hour drive to get to my sister's house for the celebration for my niece. And Christopher was with us the whole time, and it was the weekend he transitioned. So it was like, and that was our 10-year-old's response was, "Mommy, he's showing on just a little bit," you know? And so we've really surrendered to trust. And I think no matter what has been thrown at us over the years, and a lot has been thrown at us, that we learned that complete trust in him in a way that I think it's hard for some people to understand. We have a son that's in heaven, and people still today, he'd be 20 years old now. And they still apologize to me for, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm just like, "Oh, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry for me. I'm honored that the Lord used me as a vessel to carry greatness." So I could have been caught up in the loss of that, or I could have been caught up in the loss of my house or our very dear friends, or I could say, "Okay, the Lord has a bigger plan." And I'm just going to trust my process. And processes aren't always easy. I kind of equate it, and I think Kylie's heard me say this before, is, when you take something simple like silver and it goes through the process of becoming pure enough to be jewelry, it's put in the fire. And we've been put in the fire. We've been put in the fire several times. And the fire's not without pain, and it's not without, hurts, and but it's purifying us to be able to walk out what the Lord has. We would have never started the ministry if we hadn't had a fire. We would have never been able to minister to people who have lost children if we hadn't walked through that.
Yeah.
We would never be able to, have a conversation about a dear friend who transitioned if our feet hadn't been, or ourselves haven't been placed in the fire for the Lord to purify that in us. And it's not because he's a good father, but I think there's coming in our lives that he needs us to be prepared for. And sometimes he asks a little bit of us to say, "Okay, I know this isn't pleasant now, but it's going to produce something." And that's exactly what happens when you're purifying silver. The process of purifying silver is you're put in the fire, and the silversmith watches you the whole time. It's watching that piece of silver, because silver's really ugly until it's purified. I mean, it's just gross. It's like this black, nasty looking thing. And you're put in the fire, and 1 millisecond too early or 1 millisecond too late, and the silver will be destroyed. But the second it's perfect is when the master can see his reflection in it. And that's what he's doing for us. The second it's like, "Okay, you're here." All of a sudden there's me. I'm looking back, and what I'm seeing is me and you. And that's where we are, because we're called to be the lights of the world. And we just stepped out of Hanukkah and the rededication of our temple. And I think about the fact that he's called each and every one of us to be lights. And sometimes that takes a little bit of a process.
Yeah.
And I think that, the piece is, there's purification in our process. And that's what he's doing to the
Yeah.
sons all over the earth, because we are called, just like Isaiah says, arise, shine, your light has come. And we are the lights. We are the tithe to the earth to be able to bring about the restoration and the bringing forth of the Messiah in a way that people, and right now we're his reflection in the earth. And so I think that whole thing just starts with just surrendering to trusting the process and having good people like you guys, or our friends or our family or whatever, coming alongside of us, because it does. There are challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not the end. Period. It's just not the end. Whether it be
Yeah.
here or there, it's still not the end. And
Yeah.
that was what we had to come to years ago. Is there is that process, there is that fire, and we, like she said, we know about that fire. We walked through some of it. But the Lord is just so awesome and so amazing. He just has held his hand on us and saw us through everything. Again, like she mentioned, it's not exactly what we want, but it's what we need. And that is the thing, I guess probably one of the greatest revelations that we had years ago, is knowing that he's going to provide our needs, not necessarily our wants. But when we're walking through that fire time or those challenges, I mean, not going to say they're not going to come. They're going to come. They'll be there. But how we respond and how we acknowledge that is, I think, more important than anything.
Right. And yesterday we did a webinar, and we talked a little bit about how to overcome some of that negative things in our life. And the first thing I said is with gratefulness. You have a heart of gratitude. So in the morning when you get up and you're struggling, the first thing that should come out of your mouth is something that you're grateful for. If you're physically sick, or your body's not working the way it is, or you've, the doctor has said something that's not great, just, wake up and give something grateful about your health. Thank you, Lord. I just woke up with a deep breath. I think we have a tendency, especially in the world today, is the very first thing we do is grab our phones. Look what's going on in the world today. We're going to pick up the phone and we're going to see what's happening before we've even given honor to our Creator. And out of our heart, the rest of our day can speak. And so if we start off with that trust and gratitude each morning with the Lord,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's 2 words. Lord, I'm thank you for my breath. Just thank you. Thank you that today is going to be a great day at my job. Thank you that I'm not going to fight with my kids to get up out of bed this morning. When you've got 5 teenagers in the house, that can be a thing. But we have to reimagine the world's thinking system. Focus more on the trust, because Lord, you've said, you promised you were going to provide all of my needs, and our gratefulness. And all of a sudden we see more and more positive things happening in our life. Or I'm grateful for my relationship with Christopher. We could talk about things. We could laugh about things. We could go swimming in icy cold water together in Florida. We could, go to the butterfly place. He loved that place. He would take everybody there. I mean, we got to spend the year before he transitioned, we got to spend a whole week with he and his wife and kids, just experiencing, their life in Florida. So I'm grateful for those times. I think we just have to change our focus a little bit.
I've loved listening to every single word that both of you have shared the whole way through. And every time I hear you, drop a little nugget, I'm like, oh, I've got something to ask. I've got something to put in there. But I just also am extremely grateful just to have you continue to flow with everything that you've learned along the way, like the practical everyday choice of trusting in the Lord with all of your heart and not needing to know not needing to have the understanding of why, but why this house, why this person. But the reality is, for you and for us and people similar to us, is that we endeavor to walk in that place of trusting him with everything that we have, not needing to understand why is it that church that we gave our all to, I didn't get the result back from that relationship that I may have expected. Well, I'm just going to trust you. Why is it that this happened? And so as I'm listening to you, I'm just hearing, the word as in not just Jesus, the word, but the word as in, the scripture, the word just flowing through the example of the way that you've chosen to live your life. It's not like it's just a book to you. It's not just a scripture. It's your life. It's your understanding. It's your walk with him, and the tapestry of his love that connects it all together. That connects us to you. That connects us to each other. I keep on hearing that in the flow of your conversation, and I love the discussion around ascension. I don't know that it's, in the old church paradigm that we came out of, that was a really, that was kind of a dangerous or weird or strange or alternate reality that was not necessarily seen as a place that you should dwell. And when you talk about, friends that have transitioned, full time into heaven, their body is no longer here that we're aware of, and they're in an ascended state, they're in heaven, and you talk about those people talking to you. I'm completely on board. I have the same understanding. This is not a challenge in any way. It's a helping our listeners to reimagine that these realities exist at the same time in both places.
Yep.
Now, I recently had a friend of mine that also transitioned of his own accord. How about we put it like that?
Right.
That's how about we introduce new language and not judge what it is that happened in that place. And I went to a funeral. I rode on my motorbike 750 kilometers to go to this funeral. And the whole time I was riding my motorbike, that person was talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I got to the funeral, and I'm okay with that. My understanding is okay with that. I'm not frightened. I'm not needing to necessarily explain that to people or have people understand that either. I walk in the reality of being a son who is protected from anything that somebody might tell me is dangerous in that sense. So to have him talking to me in my helmet is completely normal to me. Now I get to the funeral, and there's three people who are unaware of a relationship that they could have with the creator of the world at this stage.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in the old days, I guess we would have called them not Christian people or something like that.
Let's call them pre-believers.
Exactly.
They were prophesying their future, pre-believers.
Exactly. So I go to the funeral. These three guys who are dear friends of the guy who's no longer with us. I said to them, "Did he used to say these words?" Because he'd been saying them to me the day before, and they all turned to me and they said, "Yes." And they went, "No way." They said, and all three of them shared very, very quickly in the crammed space of time we had before the funeral that person had been visiting them in their dreams in the time between when he died and the funeral. But all three of those guys, in their language, wrote that off as being a dream or not real or something in their imagination. And I think that for me, who operates and functions and sees in that space at the same time as reality, I am on the adventure of introducing to the world and people like those guys, those friends of mine, that this is not an alternate reality in that it's separate to our life, but it is a part of our life if we choose for it to be. So in the discussion around ascension, this is, a huge part of your ministry. This is what you do through communities, through hubs online. This is how we've come to know you. This is how we've come to know people in our own country who are connected to you guys, who are also ascending, learning how to ascend, learning how to function in that space, and coming to the point where we know that this is not just a one-off event or a weekly event, but this is also merging in with our everyday existence. How do you help people? Can you help people that don't believe that they can see in that space, firstly, and also that even if they could, that they can't see the benefit of it in their life? How do you navigate that?
First of all, just love them.
Yeah.
And be opened. I think be open with them. Do you have something that you want to share about that before I?
Yeah, I mean, if it seems I've found in the past that as people share, the Lord will give you discernment right then. And as people may share what they're seeing, you can help them and confirm that. And because a lot of times we found people in the past have had doubt, but they don't realize that they're 100% accurate, if that makes sense. And they weren't 100% sure that they were seeing as the way. Let me say this. Years ago, Nancy and I were in the pulpit. We were doing something, and she stopped preaching and she began to gaze off into the heavenlies. And I had really this is a long time ago, and I'd been just inquiring the Lord. And I'm like, Lord, I want to see like she sees. I want to see what she's seeing. And I had gotten kind of close to her, and I'm looking into the same direction she's looking, and I couldn't see a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is she seeing? I'm like, Lord, I want to see what she's seeing. And this was the day that my revelation came and things shifted for me. He said, I've created her to see that the way that she wants to see, and I have a certain way I want you to see. And it took me a minute, and I'm like, oh, okay, show me what I need to see. And from that day forward, I've been seeing the way he wanted me to see. And not
Wow.
exactly with her, but often Shannon and I do the same thing. I mean, this happens frequently. Is some people say, "Oh, I'm seeing this," and a lot of us see the same way at times, not necessarily all the time. But He's created each and every one of us to see a certain piece, a certain way that He wants each one of us to see as an individual, the way He created us. And we do corporate ascensions, and a lot of times people are navigating simultaneously in the same area, in the same region. So it's really cool. And so just reassuring people that they're seeing correctly, and you can use your discernment on that and to help encourage people.
I
Yeah,
usually
I
say,
love,
yeah, go ahead, Sean.
yeah, I love that what you're saying, that they're seeing correctly, because seeing correctly is not necessarily seeing the same
That's right.
as each other.
Right.
So
But-
yeah, learning to trust what you're being shown is for you and is real.
Yeah, the way that He created us to see. So each one of us has a part, a very important piece. And we found that because sometimes Mom would get a download, Shannon would get a download of something, and I'll get a download. And we sat down together, and it's like, oh, wow, the whole thing came together. We may not have completely understood what our piece was, or it may be someone else. And
Well, and
Go ahead.
I think a lot of times we put in a box the way everybody should see, or we think everybody sees this way or that way. I would have probably teased with your friends, because it can start off with teasing, especially if they're pre-believers. Well, so was that a dream or was that reality?
Yeah.
And something simple, and they'll laugh it off as a joke, but you just planted it as a seed inside of them, saying, was that really? And I think part of the system, especially with people losing, is we've been so taught that it's really funny, because it's an oxymoron. They're doing the evangelism, they're getting everybody to come to the Lord so they can all go to heaven when they die. But then when they actually die, oh, well, you can't talk to them because they're dead. but you just
Mhm.
said that we were going to live forever with him in the heavenlies. So are they dead? Or are they alive in Yeshua forever? And so all of a sudden it starts the conversation of, wait a minute, because that's the big thing, the necromancy, you can't talk to dead people or
Yeah.
whatever kind of thing, which is baloney. They're more alive than we are. They don't always present. I mean, I wouldn't go out looking for somebody. I would just sit there and say, Lord, here I am. Show me what you want to show me today. But especially for pre-believers, I think, that, obviously maybe not at the funeral or whatever, but are you sure that it was a dream and not reality? Because, you've heard this guy say the exact same thing while you're riding your bike to go to the service. And but it just plants those little seeds and encourage people that they can see, because what he said earlier when we were been sharing was that, we've talked kids out of their imagination somewhere between 6 and 8. Well, our imagination is the created center point that Yahweh gave us to be able to co-create with him. And if that's not active and functioning, we're not going to step into the fullness because we're limiting our abilities. And I think sometimes the system has limited people's abilities to think that they can't hear or see for themselves. But when we openly and freely talk about it, my dad, who has supported my mom, he didn't come to the Lord till I was almost 16 years old. And he was a very good man. He didn't need to change in his life. He's kind of the black and white, it's this way or this way. And, through a set of circumstances, he ended up coming to the Lord when I was a teenager. But he wasn't a seer. But my mom was really opened. He didn't know he was a seer. Let's put it that way. He was a seer. He just didn't know he was a seer. And all of a sudden, the church that we go to, the name of it's Joyland here in Colorado. And my dad became really good friends with the pastor, came on their board of elders, that whole bit. And they were just really open and talked about everything with my dad around. They weren't hiding it. My mom would come back and tell her all the crazy stories of, the boy that got raised from the dead and the little girl who got totally healed and, the heavenly being that walked in and saved her life from doing stuff she wasn't supposed to be doing. And so she would just tell my dad all these stories. And he's like, oh, that's really good, really good. And he always supported my mom. And then all of a sudden one day, because we weren't keeping those things from him and we're really open about talking about it, the eyes of his imagination, his actual reality and seeing opened up. And they were doing an ascension at our church, and I stayed home and I was in bed watching service because they do everything by live stream too. And all of a sudden I'm taking pictures of my dad saying, and I see this in this color and this color and this color. And, my dad was 80 at the time. I see this and I see that and I see this. And I'm taking pictures on my iPad and then I send it to my sister. This is your father, it's just an example of the open. We've got this one ascension group that we have. And this guy faithfully comes and he always says, I'm not a seer. I'm not a seer. I'm not a seer. And he's an amazing guy, passionately loves the Lord. But he's in a group. His best friend is like the ultimate seer. I mean, he sees there. The dude has dream books like this big. I mean, books and books and books and books and books of them. And his dreams are like detailed like crazy. And which I always tease him, is that a dream or reality?
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, I get it now, but we were doing an ascension and the Lord, everybody was seeing all this amazing stuff. And this one guy who I'm not a seer. I'm not a seer.
That
he's like,
one guy.
He goes, all I keep hearing is this word. And so he said the word. He's always really reluctant to share because everybody else is like a psychedelic super seer, like my mom. And he's always really reluctant to share, but he's shared this one word, which unlocked the entire thing everybody else was seeing.
Yeah.
So if that person wasn't encouraged throughout all of these different times, we get together twice a month, you're seeing, you're just not seeing the way James and I see very different. He's like my mom, he's technical or everything. And I just know. So he, used his one word to unlock the entire ascension that everybody else was seeing. And we would have all been scratching our heads if he wouldn't have just said his one word. Like, why?
Yeah.
This doesn't make any, like, what is this? And it was one word that brought the entire thing together.
Yeah.
And I think that people right now, because we do have these, what I call super seers, that's really just a, earthly term and kind of a joke. They are intimidated. Everybody thinks the second they start an ascension, they're going to see like James or see like my mom, not recognizing their own way of seeing with Yahweh.
I've seen people get really frustrated, extremely frustrated. They say, I can't see. Well, first off, you don't say you can't. That's number one. But the other aspect of that is not everybody sees exactly the same, and not everybody sees. Some people just know because their spirit man just knows for a fact of something, of matter of fact. I know of a few people that might call me and say, I know this, blah, blah, blah. And I listen to them because the Lord has shown me that they know. So you have people that see, people that hear, people that know, and people that sense. I know people that sense, and I listen very closely to those people if they have something to share with me, because it's very legitimate. Not everybody is a seer, and some people see.
They're all
different.
seers. They're just not seers in the way that the world has said they can see.
Yeah.
So they're not being grateful for the way that the Lord is speaking to them in that moment, and kind of saying, well, I can't, which also frames up their existence of not being able to. And
maybe if you say that you can't, then you can't, because what comes out of your mouth is powerful.
Yeah.
And also, like, most of the world is in a pattern of conformity that is different to the way that you've chosen to raise your family. Because at the beginning, you were talking about, when your children see things or share things, you're encouraging that in them. You're encouraging them to walk in that for their entire lives. But the patterns of the world that I grew up in told me that imaginary friends were not for you to enjoy or explore or to grow up with. You need to drop off that understanding when you're young, because that is of no benefit, or it's dangerous, or there's something wrong with you. But when we change the way that we raise our children to believe they can see and have so-called imaginary friends we can interact with and function on earth as it is in heaven at the same time, then we're stepping into a generation of people that no longer have to be told that you can see, because it's weird to think that you can't.
It's true.
And I kind of think too, like there's this beautiful place of transparency that we're moving into as we mature in our sonship, where we just are communicating in an authentic way with people that is just normalizing a multidimensional reality. And we got a beautiful message from a lady in the States about one of our podcast episodes. She just came across our podcast in a moment of really difficulty, and just said, well, part of what she sent to us was just this gratitude for you. I listened to your podcast about angels, and you just made it feel so normal. And I think that's part of it, is that it's not this super spirituality, but it's actually this way that we've been created to live, is with this multidimensional awareness that we're always in, that there isn't any separation, and there's no separation in all of humanity, that we are beautifully woven into one another. And it's and I'm seeing that more and more as we become more comfortable in our own sonship, and we become more able to just be in that constant flow where we don't have those lines for our own existence, that more people are receptive to, my goodness, like it's, I know what you're saying is weird, but it's actually feels really natural and really like how it's intended to be.
I just want to throw in there, with that person that contacted us about our podcast too, we don't get a lot of feedback. We've done 100 podcasts. Actually, this is number 101. And we really don't get a lot of feedback as to whether or not people, how it makes them feel. So to have this person contact us out of nowhere was a gift straight out of heaven, because I was questioning everything that we've ever done in the hours leading up to that point. I was in the backyard feeling very sorry for myself, why, Lord, why? My house hasn't burnt down, but, I have lots of misery in my life if I choose to focus on that. And I'm trying to do these things that are beneficial, I think, for the world. I'm exposing my heart. I'm exposing everything that I am to the world because I believe that it has value, but it hurts. And I don't see a return here, God. Like, what's going on? And I walk back inside and I sit down, I pick up my phone, and this person has contacted us with this message of, their life has changed dramatically just by listening to something that we put out on the airwaves to someone we've never met or seen and may never. But it's the man that you're talking about in the Ascension group that you just need him to say one word to tie it all together. Can we, everybody is needed. Everybody is loved in this space. We need you to actually share you with us. That's right. Because that's what's going to make this all happen in the way that it's intended to be. So I love that in your Global Ascension Network, that you encourage people to be able to believe that they can see and to share what it is that they're seeing, no matter how ludicrous, no matter whether it makes sense to them or not, because we're all needed in that space.
What you just said is very true, because that's what happens is a lot of people don't feel worthy. And I think it's out of honor, out of our relationship with the being of honor, that we can honor people for their peace. You've used the word tapestry several times, and the beauty of a tapestry, but the tapestry is millions of different threads and different knots. Yeah. And all of a sudden it creates this amazing, beautiful, beautiful garment, or I mean, it's gorgeous, but without, all of a sudden there's no blue thread in it, and there's no yellow thread in it, and there's no, you're missing part of it, and I've used the word, the same analogy with the puzzle piece. We actually did an Ascension exercise one time, and I encourage you guys to try it. I got on Amazon and bought it. Now you have Amazon in Australia, so you can do this. I bought a puzzle that had blank puzzle pieces on it. And so what we did is we gave everybody a piece of the puzzle. They were pretty large pieces. And we gave everybody a piece of a puzzle, and we did an Ascension. We didn't want anybody to share their piece. We wanted them to take their piece and go and draw what they saw. And all of a sudden, everybody brought back their piece, and it made this incredible puzzle, all complete. Everybody honoring each other's piece, and some guy goes, "Look, I'll give you $1,500 for that thing. I need that puzzle." Because all of a sudden, it spoke something to him, and I was like, "What?" It's like Amazon, But I think we get to a place where we've lost the way that we're supposed to honor in a deep way. That's why this person who's a magnificent, he's very successful. But he, in that space, didn't feel worthy enough to share his one word, which unlocked everything. So as we've engaged with honor, and we're honoring each person for their very important piece, you get to a 1,000-piece puzzle, right? And all of a sudden you're missing the centerpiece. The centerpiece is missing, and you've done all this work, and the picture's not finished and all that. So people have to realize the importance of their piece, whether it's a word, whether it's just, I really feel like there's this wind blowing, or, all of that is an important piece. And I think people have been hesitant to share their piece for fear of rejection, because they don't feel worthy enough. But out of relationship with honor and honoring each person for their piece, that guy felt safe in our group, and he felt okay. We're going here. I don't get this word, and I don't understand this word, but this is what I've been hearing the whole time. And all of a sudden, it unlocked the whole thing for everybody. It just brought the puzzle to its completion. And and I love when you guys talk about the tapestry, because I think about that. Every thread, every knot, every change of color that takes place. Kylie might be a yellow and Sean might be a blue, and all of a sudden they've created this beautiful thing that is now their family with their son and pets and everything all of a sudden. But we're not the same. Thank the Lord. I look at your pictures behind you and they're not.
Yeah.
If you're missing one color out of there, it doesn't speak the same way. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really just important that we love people to their wholeness and encourage them in their ability to see, feel, hear, touch the way that the Lord has created them to. And
Yeah.
know that they don't have to do it the same way as Kylie does it, or Shannon does it, or James or Sean. They can do it the way He created them to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've got a friend of ours who's actually never been able to see with his actual eyes since the day he was born. He's what we call blind. But you know what? He can see way, way clearer than a lot of people that are searching for the opportunity to be able to believe that they can see. You'll be talking to him and he'll say, "Can you see that angel standing behind you?" And he cannot actually.
Actually.
Yeah. His eyeballs don't work.
Yep, they
Yeah.
don't.
So maybe it's possible that you can see even without eyeballs.
You can.
So guys, the website sons.global, is that how we put people in touch with you? Are you desiring for people to go to that website, or are you
Always
really busy, or what's?
We do have, so the best way to go is through the sons.global. And there's also a YouTube channel if they just want to pop on, and you can do the same thing, Global Sons for the YouTube channel. And it is a good way to get little tiny tastes of what we're doing. But those that are really have a heart to be connected and to partner with us, we do teachings this month. We literally have something every single weekend. We've got Justin Abraham next weekend, who's, I know you guys know and love, and but we're constantly doing things with our partners. This past weekend we did a meeting on yesterday, I guess past weekend. It was yesterday.
Yeah, it was.
Did a live meeting for just our partners. And we have another one on the 18th for just our partners. And there's much more in-depth teaching. While on YouTube, you get a 10-minute little clip, you'll get 3 hours of teaching multiple times a month. There's probably 120-ish teachings on there. But then you have the opportunity to also get connected into an ascension group. And those ascension groups, what we do while you're waiting for an ascension group to take place, we have something called the honeycomb, and it's for beginners. So they can try out what a group looks like. They can see how it works. They can realize that they're going to be honored for their peace. And they do that when they're just joining up with us and partnering with us. And then they get into a group, the same people every single week, all over the world. We've got groups that have 7 to 9 different nations in them. It's all according to the time that you're available. We do lots of interactive things and lots of teachings, but that group, those groups that are all over the world, they meet at the exact same time every week with the same people. So you're really building a community as we're honoring each other for the way each other sees. And that's the best way to be able to get a hold of us. And then James is running a lot of stuff here at the office when I'm not here. And
I try.
and we have people here that can answer the phones and all that kind of stuff when we're out. But going to the website's the best way to really dive in. If you just want to taste, go to YouTube. If you really want the fullness of each one of those messages, or to be connected into an ascension group, then go to the website.
We're just so grateful, guys. We're so grateful, and we just honor you both for everything that you do and the people that you are, and just for encouraging people just in their own individual walks. I know that your journey and your ministry and has spoken greatly to us over the years, and it's been such an encouragement to be able to be part of that and to be encouraged in our own spaces with our craziness, as our unique crazinesses that we all have. And yeah, it's just beautiful to feel loved and embraced in that space. And it's just been such an honor to know that we have the opportunity to find these places where people are it's hard to know whether, like, you know, I do feel like for a lot of it, it is like a sacrifice. You know, you guys have made and you know, when you spoke, James, to it with that hesitancy to share what, you know, back when you were really feeling like that the Lord was speaking to you about releasing Shannon into this global traveling space, you know, we each take on board as we're moving into the fullness of who it is that we are, and we're on this journey of finding that place of knowing that there's so much more for humanity and what our part looks like as we're wanting to see more of that become. And we're so grateful to you guys for the part that you guys have played, and those things you've laid down, and those things you've laid your hand to. And, you know, even for those crazy things like your house burning down and moving to Colorado and just starting what it is that you do, it's really inspiring. And I know that it will inspire and encourage many of our listeners just that on their own journeys, that sometimes he speaks to us in unusual ways and calls us into unusual things, and that the pathway doesn't look like the usual pathway that is carved out and told that to us within the system, that this is what it's supposed to look like. So yeah, we're really, really grateful for that.
And thank you also for, you know, being able and okay with being behind the scenes of a supernatural being such as Nancy Coen and you know, walking that out in the day-to-dayness of doing her admin and doing her tech work. I see sometimes Nancy might have difficulty bringing something on a screen or something, and there's Shannon just calmly explaining, this is how you do it. And this is how you do it. So thank you for walking that out, but that's not where you're staying. So thank you for walking that out. That's brought you to the place of where you are now. And this is the beginning of a newness for you guys, in that I've seen you talk, Shannon. I've seen you talk alongside your mum, as in not standing next to her, but on a stage where she has previously been. And you are everything that you need to be bringing to the world. You already are. And we thank you for your common sense. We thank you for your clarity. We thank you for your groundedness, because everything that it is that needs to be brought to this earth from a heavenly sense makes a lot of sense when it comes through people that are walking out the everydayness and able to clarify it for people as well. So thank you for continuing to just do so, and for doing everything that you do behind the scenes. We look forward to talking to you again at some other stage, whether it's in this kind of setting or whether it's actually in person as well. If you happen to come to Australia, well, it's a big country, but we'll find you.
Yeah,
we'll be there.
Well, we're hoping to be there this fall sometime. So I don't know what season it is for you guys, sometime between August and November. So we're working on it right now, but we're hoping to be back over there. I love coming to Australia, and I love you guys, and we had so much fun together. So hopefully we'll be able to work it out and bring some of our friends with us, and
That'd be amazing.
it will be amazing. So
thank you so much for having us. Totally honored, and awesome to be able to share. Really appreciate it. Thank
you guys. We love you.
For us too.
We love
you too. Thank you.
We will. We love you guys.
Right.
Thanks for the
You
time.
guys too. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Love you guys.
Okay, I don't even know how to get out of this program.